Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. In today's video we're going to be talking about 13 cool tricks that we can do as Necron players. So 13 cool tricks. Now some of these cool tricks you can use with other factions, but I'm trying to be specific to Necrons here. So let's get into the first one. So the first one, number 1, using the Veil of Darkness in turn 1. Now you heard me right, turn 1 you can use the Veil of Darkness relic. However, you will need to be going second and not first, because it happens in your opponent's turn. So Veil of Darkness, Necron's model only once per battle at the end of the opponent's turn. The bearer's unit that's not within engagement range, which you won't be in turn 1, well you shouldn't be anyway. You remove them from the battlefield, then in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, you're coming in the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy models. Now the reason why you could do this turn 1 is, well there's two reasons. They are not a reserve unit and they are not a strategic reserves unit. So in fact I'll prove this to you with these screenshots I've taken from the core rulebook. So reserve units are a unit that starts on the battle in a location other than the battlefield. So therefore they're going to be units that are potentially got the deep strike ability. Those kind of units, they're going to be in reserves. You've then got strategic reserves, which are units that are not deployed at the start of the battle. Which they have been. They've been deployed at the start of the battle. These kind of units are the ones that come off on they're going to come on from the table edges, turn 2 and turn 3. They've got their own restrictions. In fact, both of these reserves and strategic reserves have their own restrictions, i.e. coming in from turn 2 onwards, and there's also a restriction on how many models can go within reserves. However, the Veil of Darkness does not put them in reserves or strategic reserves. In fact, it puts them into what's classed as a repositioned unit, where you'll find these rules for repositioned units in the rules commentary PDF located at the Warhammer community downloads page. Now you're going to be looking at bullet point 2, which actually says if you are a reserve unit or a setup on the battlefield as reinforcements unit, which we are, because if we go back to the Veil of Darkness page, it doesn't directly say this, but it just says in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, set up anywhere on the battlefield. That's the only sort of correlation I can see out of this entire thing, and that will basically mean we are repositioned. We're going to be counting as moving as making a normal move when we're setting up. Da-di-da-di-da. So yeah, basically in your opponent's turn 1, you can pop this at the end of their turn, and in our turn 1, if we're going second, we can blast the crap out of our opponents. Maybe it's a Locust Lord with some Exterminator Locust Heavy Destroyers. That's something I quite like to do. But yeah, you will catch your opponent out with that one. Number 2 is the Rapid Ingress Stratagem. I mean, this could have a video in itself. It's such a good stratagem at the moment, and it's for 1 command point, and again it's at the end of your opponent's, movement phase this time, not your opponent's turn. So end of your opponent's turn, you select one unit that is within reserves, so that's the unit that's being placed into reserves, and they can arrive on the battlefield as if it was your reinforcement step of your movement phase. Now this does have a restriction this time. You can't be using this stratagem on a turn that you wouldn't normally do so. But the trick with Rapid Ingress is to be bringing an infantry unit, particularly an infantry unit, and bring them in behind obscuring terrain. So you're going to be deep striking in, maybe it's some Triumph Praetorians, something like that. You bring them in at that position behind, I say obscuring terrain, it needs to be a ruin, something that you can go through. So your opponent isn't going to necessarily be shooting us, and they're very unlikely to be charging us. Depending on, I mean, maybe they want to go for it. We don't necessarily need to be 9 inches away. We can actually be more than 9 inches away, because don't forget, when it's our turn, we've got our movement to do. So if we're moving, say, 5 inches or 10 inches, whatever the movement is, you've got plenty of movement to go using in our movement phase. And also, we can just go through the ruin, because infantry can go through ruins. So then our charge move is virtually going to be nothing. It's going to be like a 2-inch charge or whatever. You need to be out of engagement range, of course. But it's an easy way to be very sure that we're going to make a charge move. Now, of course, that is a situational situation. You need to have a ruin in place, and you need to have a position where you're not going to get targeted in your opponent's shooting phase, and also maybe they're not going to get charged. So you do need to look for these kind of key spots. But when you do find one, it's good. It is very good. Number 3, don't be afraid to get into engagement range with shooty units, such as Necron Immortals, maybe Necron Warriors. They're predominantly shooty, but don't be afraid to get into a fight with them, especially if you've kitted them out with characters and nearby buffs. So I've got some buffs to show you in this example here. We've got Amrikir the Traveller, we've got Illuminazares, and also the extra buff of the Protocol of Hungry Void, which gives you an extra bit of strength and extra bit of AP. Now what does this actually do for example, Necron Immortals? Their close combat weapon is 2 attacks per model, hit on 3, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. It's kind of mediocre. You do get 2 attacks per model, which is nice, but everything else is kind of bog standard. However, with those said buffs that we just mentioned, the strength will go to strength 5 because of the Hungry Void stratagem. The AP will go to -1 AP because again, Hungry Void stratagem and the characters within the unit. You're going to have a +1 to the hit roll with command protocols, again because there's a character in the unit, and a +1 to the wound roll because of Amrikir the Traveller. Don't forget, Immortals are naturally re-rolling ones to wound and potentially re-rolling all the wound rolls, because if you're fighting against a unit that's actually on an objective, you're re-rolling everything. So when you're already strength 5 and you've got a +1 to the wound roll, that means even going up against toughness 9, you're still wounded on 4s, and you've potentially got, you know, a 10-man unit that's 20 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounded on 4s against toughness 9. That's not too bad. -1 AP on top of that as well. It's not too bad. So don't be afraid to get into engagement range if needed. Next we come on to the ridiculous amount of defense mechanisms we've got as Necron players. We did do an entire video on this, but I just wanted to put this in a cool tricks section here. I'm going to start off with the bog standard Necron warrior with their numbers as legion ability, so you can reanimate D6 or D3+3 if you're on an objective, and you can be doing that whenever reanimation protocols activates. You can then add a reanimator, of course. That will give you an additional D3, so it could be D3+3, then +3 again. You can then add a resurrection orb, so that you can be doing this in your opponent's command phase rather than just our command phase. You could then add the protocol of Undying Legions, so you're activating all of that stuff as soon as you lose a model in your opponent's shooting phase or any of the fight phases, and it will be D3+1, in fact if you've got a character. You've then got further buffs from other areas of the index, such as Illuminazares again, who we just mentioned in the previous point. He can give a -1 AP to incoming attacks at range. In fact, it isn't just at range, it's also in melee as well. You've got the Chronomancer, which will be a -1 to the hit roll on incoming targets, incoming fire again. You've then got a Ghost Arc, so you can do all that reanimation shenanigans again as soon as you lose a model. It's once per phase, so in fact you can do it in the shooting phase, you can do it in the fight phase. You've then got Cryptek, such as I reckon the Diviner, which can give the entire unit a 4+ invulnerable save, or you take the Technomancer, which gives the entire unit a 5+ feel no pain save. You've then got the Cryptothralls, which yes, they've gone up to 60 points for the pair, but they've got the 4+ feel no pain save naturally, so you use them first, let them die first. They've got 2 wounds each as well, don't forget to reanimate them first. You then got the Canoptek Spyders. I mean, we are reaching a bit now. You don't always take these extra units. But the Canoptek Spyders allow for a 4+ feel no pain against psychic attacks. You've got the Hexmark Destroyer, which can do the free Overwatch as soon as your Necron warrior gets targeted. You've then got, the last one I've got for you in fact is one of the enhancements, which is the Hypermaterial Ablator, which again gives them the benefits of cover as well as stealth. So there's so many defense mechanisms, not just for warriors. This could apply to immortals, well not all of these things, but some of these things, most of these things can apply to immortals, to Lich Guard. We've just got so many layers of defense and you need to really make use of it. The next one is Ophydian Destroyers. Another cool trick. We've done a video on these guys as well. I think these guys are S tier. They're top tier for me personally. Not everybody chooses them. I don't know why, because they're so good, but their ability, Tunneling Horrors, where you can deep strike in, and then in the end of your opponent's turn, you can sweep them up, almost like a Veil of Darkness relic. You're sweeping them up, and then in your next movement phase, you'll bring them down again. So bear in mind, your movement phase happens after your command phase, obviously, so you're going to know what cards you've got. You're going to know what's come out of the Leviathan deck, and if you've got Secure No Man's Land just popped up, and you've got Investigate Signal, and you've got a unit now in Deep Strike reserves, the Ophydian Destroyers, they're going to be coming in, you can go, right, which one of these should we do with the Ophidians? And this, you can be doing this every single turn, and this is, so you look at your cards again, right, this time we've got an engage on all fronts, and then we've also drawn Deploy Teleport Homers. Let's go to the Ophidians and let them do it. That's why they're so good. They literally can do almost every card that you pull, almost all of them, they can achieve it. The next one relates to the Hexmark Destroyer with the enhancement, the Sovereign Coronal. It doesn't have to be a Hexmark, but he is the most ideal candidate for carrying this enhancement. It's an aura which allows other units to have the effects of being led. So just note that they are not being led, they just have the effects of being led, if that makes any sense. A lot of people are still getting this mixed up. I mean, how long has this been out now? When they're putting Chronomancers with units and they're saying, right, well, it's a -1 to hit my Doomsday Arc with a Time Splitter Mantle. That's not how it works. They just get the effects of being led, so they just basically gain command protocols. That's all it is. That's all it is. So it's a +1 to their hit roll. So what you would do with a Hexmark Destroyer with this enhancement is you would castle up. You'd get all your big hitters that normally can't have any characters because they're the big hitters. For example, you can bring your Canoptek Doomstalkers, 3 of them. You can bring your Doomsday Arcs, 3 of them. You can bring 3 lots of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, that's 9 of them. I mean, yes, they could have the Locust Lord, but you're not going to bring a Locust Lord for the Ghost Destructors. It's just no point. Critical hits on 5+, with only 3 shots in a unit, it's not worth it. Unless they're taking the Exterminators, then they're not worth it. So you may as well have this as a built-in synergy with one single Hexmark Destroyer, giving everything there, everything around it, a +1 to the hit roll. Now yes, some of these are heavy, don't get me wrong. The Doomsday Arcs are heavy, and they don't really want to move because of Devastating Wounds. They get the ability if they stay stationary. But sometimes you do need to move, or sometimes it's just a -1 to the hit roll. So it will kind of cancel that out. So that's why that could be a good method, especially the Doomstalkers, because they're going to be moving around maybe and still getting that bonus. Next we've got min-sized units are okay, or is okay. Min-sized units are okay. I've played a couple of times now with min-sized units and found them to actually do really well, which is kind of backwards. I mean, if you took note of the video we did where I went to Edict Beer's tournament, the Dominion War tournament, that was in the summer, or just gone. Was it last month? Month before? I came 4th out of 16, and I used a backwards list like this. It was a min-size unit list. I had loads and loads of units everywhere. No damage dealing. But people at the moment are like, right, we need 20 Necron Warriors, we need 10 Immortals, we need 10 Lich Guard, and we need all the bells and whistles. You don't necessarily need to. I mean, you do need some damage, don't get me wrong, and I didn't have any. I was just relying on my blind, because we were doing blind partners at the time. I was relying on that. But it's okay to take 3 Canoptek Wraiths and 5 Lich Guard on their own, and 5 Death Marks on their own, 5 Immortals on their own, because they can all do this scoring work. Your opponent is going to have to start picking them off one at a time, and they're just not going to be able to deal with all of these units. Not only that, at the moment, Necrons are quite CP heavy. They need the Protocol of Undying Legions, especially now that the Overlord's been nerfed. You need Protocol of Vengeful Stars, Protocol of Hungry Void, Protocol of Eternal Guardian. There's loads of stratagems that we actually quite like to use, which all cost CP. When you've got min-sized units, you're not relying on some of those stratagems as often as you were. Like Undying Legions. If you lose a model, you're not going to pop Undying Legions because you don't care too much about the unit. The unit is more kamikaze. And it also means you're not actually making use of reanimation protocols as much as you could be. But again, it's all about scoring. Secondaries and secondary mission cards are such a big part of the game. And if you can get scoring them with all sorts of ways, again, the Ophydian Destroyers, maybe it's a Death Marks or Deep Strike, maybe it's a Scarabs, maybe it's some Tomb Blades with the Scout move. Just play the cards, and the primaries will come. You'll have enough OC throughout the battle. Even if it does split between 2 or 3 units, you'll still have the OC. So primaries won't be a problem, secondaries definitely won't be a problem. The only problem will be for your opponent, because they now need to start split firing attacks to try and deal with 2 units at once. They're going to overperform or they're going to underperform, overkill or underkill, which is only a good thing for us. So don't be afraid to play min-sized units with Necrons. Next on the list, we've got the little move, advance, shoot, move kind of synergy with the Chronomancer. You can do this with the Royal Warden as well as the Chronomancer, or you can just do what I've got on the screen here, which is the Protocol of Sunstorm. So what you do, let's say for example you get 20 Necron Warriors and you've got a Chronomancer within the unit. You stick on the Protocol of Sunstorm or a Royal Warden, depending on what you want, and you give them the Assault keyword. So now they're going to be moving 5 inches as normal. You're going to then roll for the advance move, and you will be re-rolling that advance roll because the Chronomancer's there. So let's just say you roll a 4 or a 5. So now you've got 9 inches. If you roll that, well, if you roll a 4, you've got 9 inches there. So 9 inches total. Move, advance. You're then shooting. You're still being able to shoot because you've now gained the assault keyword. So those Ghost Reapers now may be in range. Or even if you've got the Ghost Flayers, you're still in a better range, but you're in a better position. You move up the battlefield. And then you've got the Chronometron ability from the Chronomancer to be able to move an additional 5 inches. So all in total there, if you're using that example of rolling a 4 to the advance roll, you've got the 5, then the 4, then the 5. You've just moved your Necron warriors 14 inches and still shot at the same time, which I think is pretty good. Next, we come on to, I mean, this one is common knowledge, but we've got to throw this in there because this thing, everyone was expecting it to get nerfed. I personally, I'm not. It's a character, and it's not an epic hero. But stick the Sympternal Weave on your Transcendent Catan Shard. If you're taking at least one of these, make sure you've got this enhancement built into this Catan. You must. It's so overpowered. It's insane. Because he's got the 4+ invulnerable save. In fact, let me go back a step. You're halving damage. So if your opponent has got damage 4 weapons, it goes instantly, gets halved. Before they've even shot, it's halved. It's now damage 2. So already that's one halving of all the damage, just bear that in mind. You've then got the 4+ invulnerable save, which on averages, in terms of averages, that's halving it again. So 1, 2 or 3 is a fail, 4, 5 or 6 is a pass. So you're then halving what's already been halved. You've then got a 4+ for no pain save, so any damage that does go through, every single one of those bits of damage, you get to roll a d6, and on a 4+ you ignore it. Again, a 1, 2 or 3 is a fail, a 4, 5 and a 6 is a pass. So you're halving something that's already been halved, So let's do a little bit of maths for you. So imagine the weapon that your opponent has got is a 12 damage weapon, something pretty big, and they've scored 4 wounds on us before we've taken our invulnerable save. So 12 damage weapons, instantly they become a 6 damage weapon because we're halving damage. So we've got 6 damage weapons and 4 of them have gone through. We're going to then roll 4 invulnerable saves, and on average you save 2 of them. That means only 2 have gone through that are 6 damage. That's a combination total of 12 damage. You then take 12 dice and you roll all 12 because you've got a feel no pain save on every single one of them. And on average, you're going to save 6 of them because that's half. That's just averages, right? So all in all, you're only going to take 6 wounds. That's it, 6 wounds from 4 times what? 4 times 12? That was 48 damage a moment ago. It's now just 6. So that's why that enhancement is very good. I think it's still 10 points, isn't it? I know we just had a balanced data slate thingy. I'm pretty sure it is still 10 points. It's the Transcendent Katana that's gone up in points. But the weave is definitely worth it. So take it. The next little bit of a cool trick we've got is something I need to do more often. I think it's a cool, neat trick to do, especially in friendly games, is taking the Canoptek Spiders, taking the Canoptek Scarabs, and doing the following. So we already know that your Canoptek Spiders can create Canoptek Scarabs with the Canoptek Swarm ability. So when you've lost one and they're within 6 inches, you can bring one swarm unit back, or one swarm base back. One destroyed model comes back to the unit. Fine. Now we need to go into the keywords. The keywords for the Canoptek Spiders has changed this edition, which went under the radar for a lot of people, including myself. They are not monsters anymore, they are vehicles. And vehicles have access to a little stratagem in the core rulebook called Tank Shock. So what is Tank Shock? Tank Shock is at the end of the charge phase. You select an enemy unit that's within engagement range, and then you select a melee weapon that you're equipped with. So let's just go to the Spyder even. Spyder. Just to double check. So it's a strength 8 weapon that we've got. So that would mean you're going to get 8 dice, and if we're better than their toughness, we get 2 additional dice, by the way, but let's just presume we're not. Let's just presume we're going up against toughness 10. So you get your 8 dice, and for every 5+ roll, you score a mortal wound to a maximum of 6. Already you're going to be looking at quite a few, 2 or 3 maybe, mortal wounds just from the Tank Shock stratagem. Now you can actually buff this even further with the Protocol of Hungry Void, because you can actually have an additional bit of strength just there, making it strength 9. I mean, it's only a 1 in 3 chance of actually scoring a mortal wound with a 5+, but maybe it makes a difference between making our strength better than their toughness, so you'd actually get 3 dice, not 1. So that's the first part of this little synergy trick. The second part is the Canoptek Scarabs. They've got the self-destruction ability. At the start of the fight phase, you can effectively blow one of your models up. with the Deadly Demise ability, except you're not actually using the Deadly Demise ability as stated in the core rules. Instead, what you're doing is on a 2, 3, 4 or 5, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 it's D3 plus 3, and if it's against a vehicle it's a +1 to this roll. So when you combine Tank Shot, which is going to be a couple of mortal wounds, maybe 3, and then you combine it with the Scarab's Explosion ability, which is probably a couple on average, D3. I mean, you might roll a 6, but let's just say averages for now. You're looking at scoring like maybe 5 mortal wounds just off the bat there. And one of them is a stratagem, one of them is a natural ability. So definitely worth it, definitely worth it. Then of course you get to fight as well with the Spyders and the Scarabs. And then you bring a Scarab back, don't forget that part too. Next I want to talk about the Monolith, the Necron Monolith, and the Eternity Gate ability. A lot of people seem to forget about this ability. It's a pretty decent ability overall. It's very similar to having something like a Veil of Darkness in a way. So what is the Eternity Gate? In the reinforcement step of your movement phase, you select one infantry unit that is either in reserves or on the battlefield. And if you select the latter, then you remove them from the battlefield and place them into reserves. Notice it says place them into reserves, whereas with the Veil of Darkness it doesn't actually say that. Then the unit is set up anywhere on the battlefield that is wholly within 6 inches of the Monolith and not within engagement range. They then can't charge this turn, which is fine. We don't necessarily need to charge with these guys. Now, notice as well, it doesn't say that they can't be in engagement range to use the ability like the Veil of Darkness does. The Veil of Darkness does restrict you if you are within engagement range. So if you can get these guys out of a fight, bearing in mind we've already used our reanimation protocols, shenanigans that we spoke about earlier as well, you can suck them up and then plonk them on somewhere else on the battlefield where the Monolith is, bearing in mind that the Monolith's got Deep Strike if you wanted to use that. So yeah, it's a way of getting the Necrons out of trouble and also moving units around the battlefield. Freely as well. I mean, okay, you got to pay for the Monolith, which is quite an expensive model, but once you have done, it's still got the heavy weapons on the sides of the Monolith, and you're moving units around, giving you a bit of flexibility. Sticking with a vehicle, where it's going to be more than one vehicle, a lot of people like the idea of having this armoured list, a vehicle heavy list, and I also agree with them. I think it's a pretty cool idea. We've got quite a lot of high toughness items and vehicles within our Necrons index, and you should make use of it. Make the most of it. I mean, we just spoke about the Monolith, not necessarily here for the Eternity Gate because there's no infantry here that we're discussing, but the Doomsday Arcs, the Canoptek Doomstalkers, the Tesseract Bolt maybe, the Triax Stalker, even the Command Barge, which you can actually put the Sovereign Coronal Aura on maybe to give everything around it a +1 to the hit roll. But yeah, you can make use of this. You will catch a few people out with this because they're going to have a balanced list, and if they've not got enough to take on all of our big vehicles that have got super high toughnesses and loads of wounds, then they might struggle. Now we might struggle on the flip side of that in terms of scoring secondaries, but if you're having a fun list, hey, go for it. The last one on my list is making use of our lone operatives. This is a cool trick to do because you could have a load of Hexamite Destroyers, a load of Technomancers with lone operative with a Canoptek Cloak, and you could also have a Luminazares. All three of these individual units have the lone operative ability, so therefore they cannot be targeted unless our opponent is shooting within 12 inches. So if you've guarded them correctly with loads of Necron warriors, banks of 20 warriors, maybe Ghost Arcs, and you've got anti-deep strike units, maybe you've got the Scarabs. I was going to say the fortification, but it's way too expensive at the moment. Can't believe that didn't get a price drop. If your opponent's got no way to get to them, whether it be in melee or at range, then they're just going to keep providing the buffs that they're going to keep providing. So make use of your lone operatives, especially the Hexamite Destroyer. A little bit of a dark horse because he can go into deep strike and do other things, such as deploy teleport homers, investigate signals behind enemy lines. So he's got other uses as well. So yeah guys, that is my 13 cool tricks that you can do with Necrons. If you've got any more tricks to add, put them in the comments down below or have a look at them, give you a little heart and a thumbs up, especially if I like those. But yeah, other than that, all that is left to say is thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.